Welcome to this week's Who the Folk podcast. I'm Lonnie Goldsmith, the editor of TC Jew Folk. This week I talked to Liba Herman, the owner of Studio Inside Out in St. Louis Park. We talk about her inheriting her mother's love of art, the importance of art in society, and what her process for creating painting is on this week's Who the Folk podcast. But before we hear from Liba, it is still winter out there, so check out the TC Jew Folk merch store with new designs and new colors of hats and sweatshirts that help you stay warm and help support TC Jew Folk and our mission at the same time. Check it out at tcjewfolk.com/store. Liba Herman, welcome to the Who the Folk podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. What an opportunity.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. We are here in Studio Inside Out here in St. Louis Park. It is your business, this art studio that you have created here. I guess as a jumping off point, tell us what Studio Inside Out is.
Well, I will tell you, my intention was not as a business. So that's a fault right there to begin. But I intended to create a space unique than any other creative space in the Twin Cities for people to come and feel and be with whatever they're holding without the essence of product in mind, which is like the face you're making that people can't see.
Right.
What does that mean? What does that mean? It's really a radical about face, a new way of thinking. Why create art if not for the sake of, for a gift, for exercising a skill, for what, right? And so here we explore what that's about.
Okay. How long have it's such an interesting sort of turn how you ended up with, the model has sort of evolved, I would imagine, from what you thought it was going to be.
It has.
Okay.
It has evolved. I could tell you a little bit about my background.
I was going to ask that next. So.
Absolutely. So I grew up here in the Twin Cities in a family that was in many ways walking, living, breathing, sleeping art. My mother has been a tour guide at the Walker Art Center for over 50 years. I think she's the longest living tour guide there. The MIA, these maker spaces and Walker Art Labs is where we were raised. And so it is very much been an immersion. My father was also a sculptor in graduate school and an architect, not an architect, but a lover of architecture. They would schlep us to remote Minnesota to look at Frank Lloyd Wright Kenner-Leaving gas stations, and they would take us all over the country looking at obscure, but for them important. They were very important arts and architectural impacts to our society. And so this was something that was very much ingrained in all three of my siblings, was the importance of art in space, history, and societal awareness. So I grew up at the Walker Sculpture Garden. I remember staring at the wall at the art that was either like Rothko or someone, and I would look at my mother and I would say, it was just like a blue square, right? Or a black toilet, right? And it would, I could do that. And she'd look at me and she'd say, but you didn't, right? And so our whole lives, my parents collected art and explained and explored with us artists. And so it was really an important piece of our upbringing. But soon after graduated from college, did I really begin to notice something separating in me, sort of an offshoot. The apple didn't fall far from the tree in my art appreciation, but the idea of art for the sake of art making and expression became very important to me, beyond how much it might be worth or what impact it had on societal understanding. That became something I began to grapple with. I was also very involved with and fortunate to be a part of the Twin City art community, being a part of the Twin Cities Jewish Artist Laboratory. I was involved with Ramon, teaching for Ramon. I was in some art exhibits with mixed media collage and assemblage, beadwork. There was an exhibit called Creating and Connecting Art by Jewish Women at a time when these art exhibits were not yet brought to the Twin Cities. So I was very fortunate, but I found myself pushing back internally
Okay.
at the identity of an artist, being introduced. This is Liba, she's an artist, or she's an environmentalist. And I really just began to tease apart what that meant. And for me, and I'll tell in a moment how I discovered this type of painting.
Okay.
But for me, the idea that by identifying as such, in some ways separated me and gave me a backstage pass or a golden ticket that I could express. I could paint, I could play. But where did that leave everybody else in society that wasn't given that label?
Mm-hmm. So how did you know, like, how to process what that was like what was coming? That's like such a hard thing to grapple with, I would think, given how immersed and given how central art is to your family identity.
Yes, I think it was an enormous Freudian response, I would say. I joke about that sometimes because my parents really, and I don't say this in a disrespectful or judgmental way to anyone, that I think that everything has its place in our world. Looking at art history for hundreds of years, the impact and the understanding we can learn about societies and civilization through art is undeniable. Mm-hmm. So for me, I had a very transformative experience when I left Minneapolis after college and moved to Oregon, and I discovered a way of painting then that was taking off in the West Coast in the 80s, and in the Bay Area, Berkeley, Noe Valley, these areas, Esalen Institute, and they called it then intuitive painting, process painting, spontaneous expression. This was taking off with people like Michelle Cassou, Stuart Cubley, Pat Allen. Pat is, incidentally, for those of you on this podcast, might know Jewish Studio Project. That is the mother of Rabbi Adina at Jewish Studio Project.
Oh, okay.
So I was studying her for years before she even was working with her daughter to create this incredible process arts Jewish studio out in the Bay. So I began to take a class called soul painting. And this was, again, coming off of me leaving Minneapolis and my home and all that I knew art to be and what most of society looked at art to be. But looking at art for a way of exploring skill and excellence, or looking at art, but not doing it for the sake of play like we used to do when we were kids.
Right.
So when I discovered soul painting, it was an enormous explosion for me. I was actually, in addition to discovering it, going through a very challenging process as my father was recently diagnosed with a rare kind of cancer at that time. So not only was it my first time living away from Minneapolis in my 20s, but my father was in the process of passing, and then I found soul painting.
Yeah.
So I was very enamored with the idea that art could be engaged in beyond skill development or for use in clinical fields like art therapy, expressive arts therapy, working with a diagnostic context with clinicians. So the idea of reclaiming what we have when we are children. And I began to lay study with the people out in Noe Valley at the Center for Creative Exploration and places like this. There's one called the Painting Institute. So I began to explore and read and take some trainings and would fly out even with my little baby. My husband was so supportive, out to Noe Valley for 5-day or week-long retreats. And I really began to understand this idea that when we are children, when we are 2 years old, it's really a very finite window of 2 to 5 years old. We have this very innate, free, exploratory space that comes from a visceral place of creative expression. And it's soul work. It really is. It's intuitive, which is why some call it intuitive painting. I liken it to when a child is, blowing air on the hot window on a cold winter day, right?
Right, and you see the breath.
Yeah, the breath, and the child is taking their finger and they're meandering with it, or tracing their fingers in the sand with a stick, right? Different than doodling, different than Zen doodling. We can maybe talk later about why, but this place inside us, we all have. It isn't just for those who later identify as an artist or, oh, you're so talented, right? So I really began to study the psychology around expressive arts and how at really the age of 5, the moment we enter primary school, the moment that we enter kindergarten, even with the most well-intended, amazing, badass art teachers, right?
Yeah.
It's still a context of this is the elements and principles of design. This is what we need to get through. This is abstract, representational, right?
Right.
This is cubism. And understanding art history, it has its place. But what then is lost? This other way. This other way. When I came back from Oregon and I decided to stay here after my father ended up passing to be here with my family, I began to explore this that I experienced in my own home with friends.
Yeah.
And I found it to be incredibly transformative for my friends as well, just giving them a place to be free and take off the masks and not to paint or create something on a canvas that felt permanent, felt like I had to have a certain quality or qualification prior to even getting out of the gate to create, right?
Yeah. It sounds like you found this type of art at the time in your life where you needed most to find it.
I did. I definitely did. And I think that a lot of the students that come into my session also would say the same. I took a pause from the studio that you're in right now is sort of a second opportunity that I had to. I used to have a studio out of my home.
Oh, okay.
In St. Louis Park here. I developed a freestanding studio attached to my home. People would come from behind and they would access their separate door, but they'd have to go into my home and use the restroom and everything. So I knew that when I paused when I had my third child, that when and if I ever opened up again, it would be here.
Outside of
Outside.
Yeah.
And so I found that a lot of people that come new are, yes, they're seeking transition. What's seeking transition? They're within transition, and they have had loss recently, or they're often coming at the new year, right? Either secular or in the fall with the Jewish New Year, they're coming because they want to bring something new or manifest something new in their life or let go of.
Right.
And so that's very normal. It's not necessarily the only way folks come to me. Because I'm not offering, again, a clinical art therapy context, I am not looking to explain to people what their paintings mean. It's a very free, open space, and I think for that, it benefits the people who are coming in, looking and seeking, but also it's confusing to many people in the Twin Cities too, I've noticed over the last couple of years, to introduce this and differentiate it from places like the mess hall where you splatter paint, or you come, Pinot's Palette, where you come and you have a canvas that you are conquering with several of your friends, Pinot's Palette with wine, and people want that.
Right.
It's some structure.
Yeah.
The idea of coming at a white piece of paper, and a large one at that.
Yeah, it's big, and this is something that people can't see because obviously, again, audio medium, but it's not a small piece of paper that's on the wall.
Well, that one's double behind you, but that in front of you.
Okay.
But yeah, 24 by 36. And I used to offer folks an option of 2 different sizes, but obviously they would take the smaller one.
Oh, yeah.
But as they grew more comfortable in the medium, they would definitely want larger. And the one that you're staring at now is doubled up because some people want that. And why we have wall to wall and go up almost 10 feet is that people can sometimes add paper. They want to add and explore and not feel a sense of limitless, a limit to what they're doing.
It's daunting, the blank piece of paper.
Yeah, tell me more.
So you asked me before we started.
I did.
About, like, if what would I paint?
Yeah, what if that was yours, Lon?
I would find an excuse to pack up and leave.
You would, yeah.
So, I know this as a journalist, the blank page, like when I know I have an article to write and I know I have the topic and I know I've done the interviews and I've done the work and the research and it's all there, and the blank white screen of a Google Doc is staring at me, I've been doing this a long time. It is still daunting.
Yeah.
Every time to just figure out where to start.
Right. And the pressure of having a deadline, right?
Yeah.
That adds to it as
Right.
well, right?
It's self-imposed, but also not. So, like, that's a little bit fractionally easier. But, like, yeah, the idea of this piece has to get done because I would like it to run on this day,
Yes.
and I am nowhere.
Yes, and so that this is what I want to share with you. Makes what we do in here very distinct to what you're going to find much else in society revolving around the Edina Art Center, any of the centers we talked about a moment ago. And again, I'm often sending people to these places if that's what they're looking for. So I really want to hold it's all respected and is honored. I would say that what I tell people I do in here is for kids, when I have kids classes, so once a month I have a painting and pizza where we have kids 5 to 11 come here with me. And what we're doing, and the kids don't realize that this is what's happening, right? It's sort of the subconscious,
Right.
come on in. But in our day and age right now, and I'm going to answer your question,
No,
but I have to do it this way, is that because we have to look at really all the ages that we exist around creativity and creative awareness. And that stifled piece I was talking about earlier that happens, I believe, when we get into grade school, that sense of freedom that really does get put in a box if it's not something you're exhibiting around skill. But with kids, when they come in here, I often sit them on the floor after their long day at school, and these are kids with a lot of spelches, some of these kids. Parents say, oh, my boy can't come there, it's only for girls, right? Oh, I have boys in here with serious spelches, and they come in here, and I sit them on a cushion, and I say, can you guys all tell me, this is a little challenge to you, can you tell me, where in your day do you have quiet? And these kids are looking at each other, completely dumbfounded with the answer. I say, I said, but not when you're sleeping. Oh, shoot, they say, right? If not when we're sleeping, then when?
Yeah.
And they really understand that there's no place in their day. And this isn't a fault or judgment to their parents. I'm a parent of 3, and my kids aren't sitting on the floor doing meditation every morning. Let's be real. No. So I often explain to them and inject mindfulness to these children in a world that they are devout of any kind of pause.
Yeah.
And if there's a pause, it's involving a video game or their phone or their parents' phone in a restaurant. And so it's really just about letting them experience paint in an exploratory way in quiet. And these kids that have been busy all day, and they're exhausted, they meander and they wander. And I kick their parents out lovingly. And I pull them aside when they enter back in this space, and I say, listen, I wanted to welcome you back into the space, and please notice that you may have an inclination as the parent, as an adult. What do you think, Lonnie, that they would normally, as a parent, say when viewing right away your child's artwork? What would be a common thing to say?
I'm going back and forth between either, that's so lovely, or what is that?
Yeah, right? So right away we're telling our kids, this is subconscious, right? Yeah. So this isn't descripted. I make parents feel like they're in trouble, but what if your children, what if we, as adults as well, could paint out of the gate on that white abyss that you're staring at, without having to know what I'm going to paint, right? Without being aware that someone might come to praise it, question it, anything it. Mm-hmm. How might that change my painting experience from the beginning if I knew it wasn't for someone wasn't going to comment on it, and I didn't have to know and explain to someone what it was, right?
Yeah.
Or have my parents say, oh, no, don't ruin that, right? I mean, just an innocent comment. And so for children, when they come in here, we're doing much of preserving. We're preserving the closeness that they have if they're 7 or 8 or 10, preserving that space of creative life force, I call it. Mm-hmm. Actually, we're on a Jewish podcast here, and in Judaism, we sometimes hear the word Yetzer. You know, Yetzer Tov, Yetzer Hara, right? But the word Yetzer is actually, in Musar, it's a very beautiful idea of that which runs through us. That which runs through us. And so with you, your medium is it's broadcasting, right? It's writing articles, etc., sharing someone's story. It's storytelling. Giving someone permission with a pen and paper to write intuitively with maybe a writing prompt without any deadline in mind, right? Or someone to review it for grammar or whether it has the right tone for a haiku, right? In school, giving someone the opportunity to create a collage with magazines or paint a picture, completely removing the idea of product, creates an openness and an expansiveness that is short of miraculous without sounding dramatic.
Because it does sound a little dramatic.
It does. And one of my teachers, I'll read to you what he says, and he uses the word miraculous because if you've been doing this for as long as he has, this is one of my teachers, he's been doing this for 30 years, and I've been doing it for almost 20.
Okay.
It is profound what happens. The paintings that are behind Lonnie right now that you can't see, but if you turn around, these are some of these are adults, some of these are kids, but these adults may or may not have had any particular training in painting, but when they are coming at their work, not knowing where they're going, with full permission to create darkness, to create light, to paint without worrying if it's the right proportion, incredible parts of the unknown inside them are being revealed to themselves with a supportive guide like myself present.
Yeah.
So the essence of painting is the fundamental resting place. The essence itself is the resting place or the element in the experience rather than the product, which is easier said than done, but it's a radical concept to consider, to have your experience be more important than the outcome of your experience.
Right.
Especially in art, because art is traditionally associated with the artistic outcome, the object you get at the end of the experience. That's the reason for doing it, that the tremendous emphasis that is placed on whether it's successful, whether it's beautiful, recognizable, someone might buy it in a show, these kinds of things. So when you take that element out, and you're not evaluating success or lack thereof based on the finished product, why? What's happening in that experience?
And I think there's, the hard thing about art, I think really at any age, is that people don't get to, for the most part, don't get to experience the process of it. They don't get to stare at the blank paper, pinned to the wall and get to paint whatever they want, whatever they're feeling, whatever their mind sees. The experience for 99+% of people is to go to the walker, to have your mom guide them around and to see these works of art on the wall. And people can judge for themselves whether it's something that speaks to them or not, whether they find beauty in it or not. And that's that. They don't see or experience the process of creating on their own most of the time.
Right, and I'll share a story in just a moment, and I want to just first go back to this word I used, miraculous, right? Which is grand, but the idea to consider engaging in art making just for the mystery. I use that word mystery.
Yeah.
The mystery in this case of the painting process purely for the serendipity of discovery.
Yeah.
So not even necessarily having something in your mind, because once it's in your mind, you're almost painting to paint what you saw in your mind. So really just following that exploratory experience rather than concerned about how it turns out. I mentioned my mom a couple of times because she's been really a positive, pivotal force in my life in this way. And when I was involved in the Minneapolis Jewish Artist Lab with Robin Awend, who was such a force for
fantastic.
Many years there, I was fortunate to be part of that group as a facilitator one year as well as a participant. And I said to my mother, Mom, you are taking people around to stand in front of art, to question, to grapple with, to dialogue, to challenge all of these experiences that you give to people, and you're writing, you're critiquing, all these. When is the last time, this is what I do, this is what I enjoy, is when is the last time you actually engaged in the mystery yourself? So I invited her to join me in the lab, and she was in the lab, I think she was in 2 years.
Wow.
And so she didn't just talk about the art and take people around the Twin Cities on her tours of public art, which is an incredible experience. I highly recommend going on a walk with my mother. Anywhere in the Twin Cities, any bus stop or promenade downtown. looking beneath your feet at the potholes and everywhere you look. It's quite surprising. It's quite an adventure. But the adventure of experiencing it yourself with freedom. And so she created art for those 2 years and was in the exhibits herself versus taking people to them. And if she were here, we could ask her, what was that like for you? And I think that it says a lot that she put these works up in her home next to the likes of Frank Stella or the myriad of artists that she honors herself.
Changes your perspective on the outcome, I think, when you immerse yourself in the experience itself. Rather than just staring at someone else's finished project or product, you get to see what you created on the wall with them. And I think it changes how you look at art in general when you immerse yourself in it, I would imagine.
Definitely. And I would say even that is the idea of what we do in here is much more similar to a visual journaling. So people say, oh, do you ever have art exhibits of what you're doing in there? And I try really hard, and it's I don't always nail it, but I try really hard not, when people are coming to me, I have my David Letterman top 10 of what I hear when people say, oh, you own an art studio, right? I can tell you in a moment what they say, but I really try not to correct people or make them feel like I'm judging the way that they're asking these very common and normal questions.
Right.
But the idea of what we're doing in here is so much more of a visual journaling. You're not going to take your journal where you're writing about your innards and share it with the world necessarily.
Right.
Some people do in blog formats,
Yeah.
but even those have an opportunity to be edited. So the people that create art in here oftentimes are staying on the same piece for weeks at a time. They come back and revisit it.
Really?
So the one behind you here, this woman has been on for probably several months, and she comes back each week looking at what is there, meeting it like a continued conversation. So the same person who was there the week before is still standing there, but you're changed. It's been 7 days. You may have had this or that conversation or an experience at work, or these things change us and shift our perspective and our openness or closeness around our relationships. And so when you're meeting an art piece that you've been on for some time, you meet these different levels of completion. And so when I have people come out into the world and they say to me, oh, you have an art studio, great. I'll say you should come sometime. So the top things I hear, do you want to give them a go or should I?
Oh, no, you go.
Or when I
can
asked you,
Yeah.
would you like to paint today, right? The idea of top 10 is by far, oh, my uncle's the artist, right? Or someone else is the artist in the
Artist in the
family,
family,
right?
yep.
Boom. So that's shrinking the playing field right there. I don't have a creative bone in my body. Maybe, oh, you wouldn't want to know what I could do. I could only do stick figures, right? And so then we engage in the conversation. And so every time we come together here at Studio Inside Out, whether it's a group where I'm working with a Jewish cohort, where I have Talmud Torah of Minneapolis come here, and when I say that, you probably go right to the children. Well, I had the opportunity to have my teachers and principals. I had Jody Marimi brought the staff of
that's awesome.
a staff retreat afternoon as the end of the year time together, and we all came in here, and in comes Abraham Atedki and Susie Shalom, and my teachers.
Yes.
And so bringing them in here and giving them the opportunity to take pause and create without worrying about perfection or if it's going to be in a gallery and such, and sharing with them the demystification of the ability, the permission to create without the end result in mind. It really was incredibly freeing, and with a Jewish lens. But when people come here, we often sit together and we talk about what art means to you. I'll often ask them, what is a creative memory from when you were a child? And I have folks who will say to me something very positive. Oh, my grandmother would unearth her pounds and pounds of sewing materials and all the different all the things that that what she taught me. But then I'll have somebody who will, in tears in their eyes, say, I remember in 3rd grade when I was painting rainbows, and I was painting only rainbows. And my mother and my teachers all felt something was wrong because I wouldn't want to paint anything else week after week whenever I had free time or whenever I was asked to engage in a project. I would be painting rainbows. I was brought to the office and we were discussing this, and I remember this is what the person would relay, the sadness that there was something wrong with that.
Yeah.
So these are the kind of stories, and the range in which I hear from people is deep, and the idea of what is art to me and who is an artist and where the place is in society is quite channeled.
Yeah. I'm curious, like some of the offerings that you have here, how do you come up with a sort of topic, or is that not how it works?
It's not how it works. People
Okay.
say to me, come, please have a night where you're giving me a theme. I used to do themes.
Okay.
I used to say, oh, it's Valentine's Day, come, let's paint love. Let's talk about what love means to you. And I don't mind giving a little bit of a starting point. I've had several Twin City organizations hire me to do special events for Yom HaAtzmaut.
Sure.
I've had NCSY, JSU, I've had different organizations have me come in and host a themed event. And I do enjoy that. It's a different context than my weekly classes, which I host on Thursday mornings and Thursday evenings that are sort of drop-in, or a series where I have intuitive painting, and I call it either soul painting, or depending on what I think will bring folks in, present moment painting.
Yeah.
I think that people have a hard time understanding what we're doing in here, and so I explain to them that being in the present moment is not me giving them a starting idea. But they're not alone in this. So people do like structure. And so I'll often maybe accompany someone who's having some trepidation over to their white abyss. And we'll talk about what might happen if. Well, what happens if I don't know what's going to happen?
Right.
And that is the place, the unknown. That is the place where we start. And that is the place where the 2-year-old starts. That's the place where the 2-year-old can freely explore. There's a painting behind Lonnie right now that has an eye of the human body, and it shows tears coming down, and it has a Jewish star. And this was a night that was someone's birthday party. It was an adult birthday party. Someone in the community asked me to host a women's gathering. And when I say birthday party, there was food, there was wine, but everyone had a white piece of paper, and I welcomed everybody in to experience what it might be like to be a kid again. But this person's paper wasn't facing everybody else's. And when I said, you have permission, and I put my hand on her shoulder to paint, this woman was 32, whatever you're holding, she took the bait, if you will,
Yes.
right? She believed me when I said it's okay if it's not perfect, if your self-portrait looks like Yoda or looks like a 3-year-old did it, right? And sometimes I will put up pieces like I have for you here, Lonnie, and I'll say, which ones do you think are kids? Which ones do you think are adults? People can't tell the difference because the way in which we create a culture here is that it's all acceptable and that we aren't painting for the canvas, right? For the art show, for the commission, which has its place, once again, I will say. Because there are people who will listen to this show that I am friends with, and they create incredible works, and I respect them, and I was there too. But this is just another way. It's a reclaiming of. And I really have grown quite passionate in seeing people come in here year after year. On the shelves there, you have people who have continued paintings that come in. They take their piece, they put it back on the wall. Some, there's a 2-month gap in between. Some, it's just 1 week in between. But it's quite an honor to see what happens and unfolds when someone is able to journal visually all that they're holding and not worry about it being critiqued or being commented on. And it's quite freeing.
Cathartic.
Extremely. And extremely therapeutic, which I say mindfully, right? I'm seeking to become, I'm seeking trauma-informed certification to be able to better hold the students that do come here that are experiencing trauma. And really, quite frankly, we all are experiencing some sort of trauma from one thing or another, especially with what's happening in the Middle East right now, inundated with social media engagement, if not for ourselves, monitoring what our children, our teens are watching. And it's really, it's really, in some days, more than we can hold. I'm on the WhatsApp groups. I'm talking to Hillel directors as I'm poising to have my daughter begin to apply for colleges next year. And so I think it's really important for everyone in the Jewish community and outer communities to continue to find balance in their lives for areas such as wellness in yoga or movement of body, a simple commitment to walking in nature in our Twin Cities parks, or coming to a space like this where they can just be free to explore with a paintbrush. And not just any old paintbrush. These are natural bristle brushes that are fluid and soft and supple, and they do create an experience different than a regular paintbrush. And the materials that we use are very similar to any of the intuitive painting studios in the country. So it's a standard that has been set to elicit the ideal experience in this other way.
It's such a great space and experience that you've built here. It's very calming, even as the cars rush by Minnetonka Boulevard. It really is a calming space, even with, two large blank sheets of paper staring me down, intimidating me.
In all fairness, that's my sheet. So that's my next painting.
Okay.
So I also paint personally, and to keep myself engaged in,
Sure,
the experience,
absolutely.
Obviously. And the last one I was on for almost a year, and I'm so thankful that it's over. But why a year is that I give over to the process, and I don't give myself an end when what has been expressed is done, and it's almost like you can't see with my hands, but you're wringing out that rag, and the drips are coming. It's really wringing it out. And so I finally finished it, and this is what came, the two sheets pinned up together, so it will be large. I don't know where it will start.
How do you know when it's done?
Oh, that is...
You worked for a year. I was done with my questions, and then you opened this one up.
Yeah,
How do you know when
definitely.
you worked for a year on it? How do you know when you were done with it?
So my teachers and I, and the way that I've been mentored, there are many levels of completion. And it's this idea, again, back to the way that our society is so regimented with schedules and structures. And again, they're necessary. We need that. Sure. We need that order, that seder. But again, with kids and with adults, everything is so timed. The kids that are experiencing art in their classrooms, it's a 45-minute session. And they are walking to class in 5 minutes and walking to that. Now that became a 35-minute session. Then there's 10 minutes of instruction time, and then so it really becomes maybe 14 minutes of creation time.
If you're lucky.
If you're lucky.
Yep.
And so in here we really explore this linear and open-endedness, this abyss of permission to keep going, to not have to stop the conversation that was started. So you think about tough conversations we have with people. We're doing okay right now, right? But think of a conversation with a family member, a tough conversation, or somebody that you're experiencing conflict with at work, or areas of a tremendous complexity. You want to get out of there probably pretty quickly.
Yep.
It's hard, and maybe there's no resolution. So in here, levels of completion just means not having to have it wrapped up in a bow after 20 minutes. And so I am there as a not passive part of the experience, where I'm here as sort of a guide, if you will. If someone feels they're done, I'm not going to walk up and say, "Oh, no, you're not." If my students were here, they would scoff, because they'd say, "Yes, you do." But some of them who I've known for many years will say, "Oh, we know your story." But we ask engaging questions to kind of just sink us in deeper. I liken it to when you're in a yoga class, if you've ever experienced sort of a deep stretch, and they might say, what might happen if you took a deep breath and bent a little bit further in, leaned a little bit further in? And we think about that in productivity at work, or in a new way of division of labor within a couple living at home and changing dynamics there, or new ways of experience how we talk to one another and listen. So it's a similar way. I know it seems pretty abstract and a little obscure what I'm saying, but the idea of coming at a creative experience without, again, knowing where you're going can really extend the opportunity to be with the images, to be with what you're creating and not rush through it. So when I say a year, now, as a mother of 3 children who is trying to create this space and create community here and bring folks in to give it a try,
Yeah.
it might be an hour here, 2 hours here,
Sure.
that kind of a thing. But I come back to the conversation. I liken it to like an old friend. Oh, here you are again. And sometimes I'd laugh. I'd like, oh, I'm so know that I'm not even close to done. Like, oh, because I've been doing this for so long.
Right.
I'm open to that.
Yeah.
But I often had people who literally come here and they're here for 10 minutes and they say, okay, I'm done. Now, it's my job to read that person. And if I want them to come back or feel safe here and comfortable, I might say, okay, let's get a new sheet, right? But I know that they're going to find more in their experience for themselves, possibly how they take challenge, how they meet challenge, right? How they discover something difficult through something beautiful, or paint difficult and then find the beauty through that, these portals in a way. And so I am there to ask them questions that engage them to go deeper. Is there a part of your painting that for whatever reason you don't have to know why is just drawing to you right now, pulling to you? Well, yeah, I don't know what about that pink thing over there, but something about that. Okay, so from what was finished, quote, what was finished, I'm done. They may have ended up spending 2.5 hours in that pink space and discovering something about themselves or something they end up laughing at or creating a little critter. I mean, for a businessman or woman who is working in corporate America and wearing a suit every day and going there in the grind, working at a bank or working in accounting, wherever they are, they come here and they put on an apron and they can paint a fluid flower or a trivial, what they appear to be trivial heart, like a Hallmark heart. It can bring someone to tears. So going back to that word miraculous, again, as grandiose as it may sound, it's incredibly shape-shifting, and it's a radical about face from the way that we view art in our world. And it will change the way you stand at the Walker Art Center. It will change the way that we look at conceptual art and abstract art, and your experience at the MIA as well with traditional art.
Well, last couple of questions, because I think that's an awesome place to end it. I'll let you get to work on your newest piece. First, what is your favorite Jewish holiday?
There is no question. Sukkot.
Interesting. How come?
Sukkot. Oh my goodness, you are enveloped in the season, in the traditions, and the ask of living as your ancestors did in booths for 7 days, adorning yourself in hospitality, in the company of loved ones, inviting those who may not be able to be with you in spirit. And it's a time for me, I relish in being outside. And so my husband and I and the kids come together in our creativity. We've been married for over 20 years now, and every year we create these very elaborate sukkahs and have different decorations each year and use our flowers that he's given me throughout the year, incorporated with our sukkah. My son made a mandala this year of the flowers that he had given me, my husband. So it's a time of creativity together, collective creativity, but they don't even realize that.
That's so cool.
Right? And just eating and sharing good food together. This year was a different Sukkot for all of us, for sure. But there we were in the safety of our homes together in community, and that is by far my favorite Jewish holiday.
And what's your favorite Jewish food?
Goodness.
Save the really, really hard stuff for the end.
Well, we're coming up on Purim.
We are.
And there's only one filling as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. All right. Now we get into it. All
now
right.
we get into it.
What's the filling?
What would it feel like to paint a poppy seed hamantaschen?
Oh, that would be so tasty.
What's your filling?
Of the traditional, poppy seed, but I'm the only one in my house who likes it.
See, poppy seed.
I love poppy seed.
Come on.
I'm the only one in my house who likes it, though. We do, when we make Hamantaschen, we do lemon curd, apricots,
Yeah, lemon curd sounds great.
cookie butter, done peanut butter, done chocolate, chocolate
Reese's
chips.
Pieces. Put the Reese's Pieces in it now.
Oh, I haven't done
Yeah,
Reese's
just
Pieces.
like a cup. Put
Just
the
like a cup,
right
just
in
to
there.
drop
Oh
a
yeah,
cup
put
right
it
in.
in
All right,
there.
I'll have to
The
write-
little
I'll-
small ones are good, like the ones that will.
The minis, yeah. All right, I'll have to
minis.
recommend that for this year then. Yeah, that's, love a poppy seed though. So I always like going to the Purim carnivals at our synagogue because that's where I get my poppy from.
Yeah.
Because again, I'm the only one who eats them in the house, so we're not gonna open up a can of poppy seed just for me.
Lonnie, I'd like to read you something if I could, please.
Sure.
There's a poem that recently someone sent to me that they thought I would like this, and I wanted to read it. It's by a woman named Jennifer Healy, and it's a short poem about creativity to invite new energy. And I think it speaks to what we do here at the studio, whether I'm hosting one of my weekly sessions, similar to sort of a yoga class you would sign up for. You'd come just for a drop-in on a Thursday night, which is ongoing. Everybody, come on in. It's okay. You'll be okay. Or whether I'm being hired to host a special event at a conference, or coming to be hired for a birthday gathering for adults or for kids.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the reason, we really are inviting creativity, intergenerational creativity. Oh, I didn't get to talk about that. There's a picture on the wall of a woman who was 94 at the time, with her great-grandson who is 4. And we offer intergenerational painting parties where we have grandparents, great-grandparents, and their grandchildren here together painting, where the adults aren't just sitting, watching on their phones or taking pictures. They are painting together with their kids. It is incredibly beautiful and pretty fun and snarky to have a 9-year-old look at me and say, "What? You want me to do what with this brush?" Right? I said, when is the last time you had a paintbrush in your hand? And she looked at me and she said, 90 years. Wow. So we have Menorah Plaza behind me right now.
Yeah.
And we are going to be engaging more with bringing the folks there to just come and be with paintbrush and have color, 26 colors of paint at their disposal. And I'll accommodate them, and some have walkers and wheelchairs. But so I'd like to read this poem.
Please.
This isn't just a poem about creativity. It's a poem for creativity. The intention here is to welcome something new into your life, into your work, into your relationships, so you can create with delight and ease and without having to force it. She writes, "I wrote this poem about creativity because I decided to stop forcing and start receiving. I chose the present moment as fully and openly as I could, just as it is, just because I want to feel alive again. I wanted to feel inspiration sweep through me. I was sick of striving and I wanted to fly instead. This is the spirit of creativity, opening, allowing, experiencing, without fighting for anything. I wanted to remember how abundant I am because I'm alive. So I wrote this poem about creativity. It's called Orange Energy. All I want to do is delight, to throw the mask off, not care and not worry, not explain what I meant to do, what I mean, nor define what I do. Just be whatever I feel like being. Just relish in the energy of this moment. I want to be so alive that I feel like the moon, throwing tides just for fun, creating because it's what I'm here to do. I want to love the color orange just because it craves delight too. I want to cry for so many reasons, but also because I'm so in love with the miracle of being alive. I don't want to feel like I'm striving. I want to feel like I'm flying. I want to write the poetry, read the poetry, breathe the poetry. I want my life to be a beautiful, messy mosaic that even I can't help but fall in love with. Create, create. I feel the winds of fury blowing through me. Even my bones are smiling. I hear my veins pulsing with desire like branches dancing in the breezes. Wildflowers are waving and the ocean blossoms with a new idea. Crazy and beautiful is how I want my life to feel. And so it shall be, and now I am this energy.
Liba Herman, thank you so much for having me here at Studio Inside Out. It is such a cool space. It definitely pulses creativity. We will have links to your website in the show notes where people can check out your classes, and they can see the picture of the 94-year-old painting next to their 4-year-old great-grandchild, because it is a very cute painting. But thank you for having me. This is great.
Thank you so much for having me. Take care.
The Who the Folk podcast is a part of the Jew Folk Podcast Network and a product of Jew Folk Inc. Please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you have suggestions for other podcast guests, please email them to me at editor@tcjewfolk.com. For our other shows, check out tcjewfolk.com/podcast.